Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode on Quality Unfiltered. I'm Parveen Khan.
And hiya, I'm Suman. Quality Unfiltered is all about real stories, our experiences, challenges, and reflections coming from our work and everything around quality and leadership roles.
So, what are we going to talk about today? So, today's topic is all about metrics what, why, and some how as well. It's not just about metrics, it's not just about what numbers you are tracking, right? It's about the mindset shift, thinking from it's not just testing specific, it's more about moving it to quality, right? Shifting your thinking from testing to quality. And many of us, right, in different teams, in different companies, in different contexts that we have worked in, we might have been some point obsessed of like, let's capture the test coverage, let's just capture how many bugs we have found or where and what, right? So that we can show, because I think we want to show some numbers to show that this is where quality is. So I think everyone has their own different experience in from early career of how you show how quality is being delivered, right?
Yeah, and exactly, metrics are so vast. But think of this as a reality check on measuring what matters versus what's easy to measure or what stakeholders actually want to know. Because you might be doing something they don't even know, they should be asking that question. So, Praveen, let's start with testing metrics trap. Early in my career, number of test cases or bug founds were the key metrics my team focused on. They were even counted towards our performance reviews. Someone who did a lots of found P1 bugs, they are like outstanding performer. But times have changed, and now we would like to shift focus from testing specific metrics to team quality. So, what metrics should QE be actually be tracking or influencing, or maybe just paying attention to?
Yeah, the things that you mentioned, right? Number of test cases, like early in my career, yes, and looking at those, how many bugs have you found, and feeling proud about, or even your teammates will be, oh wow, you're such a great QE because you found so many bugs, right? So I have been
Yeah,
there.
or you can
Uh,
write 1,000 test cases.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So I've been there, and I think is definitely like that's where, and at that point in time, yes, I would say that I used to feel proud because yes, I was called up as like, oh, you're so good at finding bugs. That's the mindset. But I think now mostly the mindset shift is like from finding the bugs to preventing. How can
yeah,
we shift those conversations to preventing bugs? And metrics is totally depending. Again, everything that we talk about depends on context, right?
yeah.
So even what metrics you're capturing depends on the team, depends on the context, where they are, what they're doing. So you can't always start with lot of number of metrics to start with and say like, let's capture these metrics.
And I think
So
loss of metrics are is a red flag.
yes, and it's a trap
It's a
that
trap.
you can easily fall into. Yes, it's a trap. It looks good, like that you're capturing so many metrics, but it doesn't help at all. So for me, I think more than capturing what are the metrics that you're capturing, it's like even if we capture one single metric, for example, starting up with how many customer reporting issues after you releasing any kind of new feature, for example, right? So
Yeah.
even if you start with something simple, one metric, but you know why you're capturing that, and if the number increases or if something is coming back, how are you taking as a team, how are you taking that as a feedback, and what are you trying to improve as a team? Do you have that understanding? I think for me that is really important. For me, more than saying that, oh, we have these metrics and each sprint review or every month showing that this is the number of issues we have found the last month and this month, that doesn't give any story, doesn't give any context. It's more about we as a team capturing when we release this feature, these are the number of issues we have found, and maybe with what severity it was, like whether it was high, low, medium, and then looking at, okay, how could I have prevented that? How, what do
Yeah.
I need to improve in my testing approach, or what is it that I need to look into?
I've worked with some teams where they might execute lots of test cases.
Yeah.
And as soon as someone will say there's a high priority production issue, someone would did we test this scenario? And they are just going through just to prove that yes, we
Yeah.
tested, we did enough testing. Or
Mm,
maybe, yes, it's the edge case, and now we'll add that into a edge case. And that
exactly.
number of test cases just keeps growing because you can never have zero issues in the customer environment. There will always be, but how do you trace it back and how do you prevent from not happening it in the future?
Yeah, exactly. It's not about to reduce that number, but it's more about how can you learn how how the customers or how your users are using the features that you're releasing, and what is it that we are missing, right? It's more about understanding our users and how they're using our features, our system, our product,
Yeah.
and then incorporating that feedback into our processes. It's about that,
Sort of
about
like reverse engineering.
yes, it's about not just finding the bugs but preventing. How can we
Yeah.
prevent? How this is where like shifting the team's thinking around how can we prevent this for the next time to happen it again. And the most famous ones as well, right? Dora metrics.
Yeah.
These are some of the metrics that teams start, and most of the teams I've worked in, it's not like starting up with all four metrics
Yeah.
from Dora metrics, but it's more about what is more relevant to your context and what is the one that you can start capturing, because it's not about just coming up with what metric you want to capture, but it's about, do you have that tools in place, or do you even have a way to capture that? You need to also look into that. It's not about just coming up with, okay, let's capture, for example, like the change failure rate, but then if as a team you don't understand how do we even capture and what do we even capture,
Yeah.
then it's
And if
so
someone who is, managing multiple teams,
yeah.
same Dora metrics can have a different success criteria and different measurements. So you can't say that deployment frequency for this particular team is they do 3 times in a week, but the other team is doing maybe once in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah,
They might still be improving, but
yeah,
you can't compare apple and pears.
yeah, exactly. This reminds me, one of the team that I was working on, they were more looking at improving observability
Yeah.
on the team. It's more about, when I say observability, it's more about how can they, there was very, there was
Can they
lack
be
of
proactive
observability.
rather than
Yeah.
reactive?
They just wanted to make it more like, how quickly can we find root cause? It's not about
Yeah.
preventing the production incidents, it's more about when there are any kind of incidents, how
Yeah.
quickly can we find, or is it easier for the engineers to find? So I think they were working on improving that side of things. So at that point in time, it didn't make sense to capture how many production incidents are we having, right? So it
Yeah.
depends, like how quickly, when the incidents were found, how quickly are we able to fix that? So that was the metrics that we were capturing to understand how are we improving observability. I mean, that was more related to that team context
Yeah.
because what we were improving. So again, it's this shows, right? It depends on where you are, what you want to what are you trying to help your team to think about, and what metric can you use to track that to understand.
Yeah. For me, when we are thinking about metrics, because there can be so many, and you can use the same metrics in a multiple way, or the
Yes.
naming can be different. I always think about what we need to focus on, what are the team priorities.
Yeah.
And when I think about team quality, for me, it starts before code is written. Are
Mm-hmm.
requirements clear and testable? Or are we actually defining those stories minute before that sprint planning session?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe quality also begins with the code reviews. Are they thorough, or is it just, rubber stamp that two people must do, but then we are finding lots of issues later on? So the testing is not a bottleneck, but we need to bake that quality throughout the life cycle. Is your team following those definition of turns?
Yeah.
Look at the lead time from commit
Yeah.
to production, because longer cycle means the more chances that problems are hiding up.
Yeah.
And before release, if we are asking the team, how confident are we in shipping this? If we think like team is nervous, then something is wrong. And if we have deployed on frequent basis, track your deployment frequency. At the same time, track your rollback rate as well, because
Mm.
you might have a
Yeah.
high deployment frequency with low rollback rate. It means your quality culture is working. But if you are deploying quite often and then doing patch or hot fixes, then
Mm.
there's a problem with quality too. So
Yeah.
you touched on customer issues. We can think about that either. Customer reported issues can show where we really need to focus our quality on, not what your test plan say, because my test plan can miss the things.
Yeah.
And we can say, yeah, we have released it, and customer is reporting something
Yeah.
entirely differently. And response time, how can we act and resolve those? Because if we can't resolve quickly, then it can lead to another
Yeah.
cycle. You mentioned about quality is not just prevention, but yes, for me, it's recovery too.
Yeah, that sums it up totally, right? It's not just
Yeah.
about being reactive, but also preventing, but also how do we recover? And sometimes it could be any kind of metric, right? It could be something like you could do as simple as a team survey, asking the
Yeah.
questions about how teams are. You touched upon confident, right? How teams are confident, maybe doing a team survey. That as well is a one of the metric as well to
Or
understand.
look at your retros as
Yeah,
well, because you might find some of those pain points in the retros, and then you can build a metric you would like to improve. And then how can you actually track and define that success criteria as a team?
yeah,
Because for me, any key quality metrics team should be tracking or influencing is these kind of things, like lead time, team confidence before release, and
yeah,
maybe defect escape rate. But for me, that escape rate is ties to not only like how many bugs we couldn't capture, but more around what customer is reporting. I call that as a defect escape rather than saying, yeah, we found 10 issues and then customer reported two. So our defect escape rate is like 20%, not in that way, but like, where customers are focusing, because these tells complete quality story from requirement to customers, not just how busy your testing function look, or not thinking about, yes, testing is a bottleneck. We need to, if we fix that, we can improve quality. But quality starts way earlier than that.
yeah. This is also part of metrics, right? When we're talking about, because you touched upon defect escape rate, I know like everyone has a different definition. I know this topic is like everyone has a different definition of everything that we do around metrics, right? So even when we find any kind of issues, right, like before even they reaching to production, I think talking about those in a way that when we were performing the testing, these are the issues that it's not about saying that we found 10 issues in the lower environment, which kind of we helped in it didn't go into the production. Instead of
Yeah.
talking in such way, I think it's more about talking in more impactful way. What way those instances, talking in terms of like depending on your products, like talking in terms of maybe business value, maybe talking about in revenue, what is
Yeah.
it that you have prevented? I think using not just sometimes when you talk about metrics, it's not just about the numbers, but giving the context and telling the story of that particular number.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that kind of helps as well. So we as a team can always like, yes, we talk about it, but now how do you think these kind of conversations like related to metrics with stakeholders who just want to know what you mentioned about this, like they just ask, okay, tell us how many test cases have you run, or the most common thing, like what is the automation coverage, like what is the percentage, how many test scenarios have we automated? How do you help them understand, or how do you educate them?
Yeah. I think I've been there more than I can count. Probably thousands of times I've been asked like a similar question. Either could be from product owners, team leads, head of engineering, directors, asking, what's your automation coverage? How many tests are you planning to run for this particular release? But instead of just giving them number, I take this as opportunity to educate them. So here's the thing, we are constantly building feature. So that percentage is also moving. So we can
Mm,
never have that 100% coverage. It's not even feasible. You shouldn't be targeting for that.
yeah,
Because if one of the QEs in my team will say, yeah, we have executed 50% of test cases, but then 50% of what exactly, right? Because when I look at a feature on a screen, I'm seeing UI, I'm thinking about how this API response request will look into database infrastructure. So my coverage calculation is going to be completely different from someone else on the team. Maybe it could be based on their experience and the skill level. So the number becomes
Mm,
meaningless. So
yeah.
rather than talking about numbers, I shift the conversation around risk and value. For example, Amazon's homepage. The product search should return relevant results within X milliseconds. That directly impacts business. And that's the conversation most stakeholders do understand. So I focus on automation on critical user journey, but I won't tell them about that. We have automated X number of user journeys, or we won't be chasing any edge cases. I talk more about stakeholders' language, risk, value, business impact, because when you're focusing more on those, they stop caring about number of test cases you run. Because
Mm,
all they want to think is, have you captured the risk? Is business is going to have any impact in a negative way when we release that, right? So giving that confidence within our testing, that's what it matters, because someone can write 30 test cases for a feature
mm,
and still completely miss the main risk that can bring the system down. So it's about educating them to ask better questions, not
mm.
just giving numbers they want. Because, yes, I can give the numbers, I can do mapping with test cases and all, but it can never be the true value of the business impact. Have you been in the similar situation where people are asking, what's our automation coverage?
Yeah, definitely. That's like a golden question in any time when we talk about metrics, I believe. That's the question that comes up, like number of test cases and the automation coverage is the most topmost one.
Yeah,
And yes, and initially it used to definitely frustrate me of like, why? What does it give? But the more experience you gain of understanding like why they're asking, I think that's where it becomes like, okay, you convert your discussions into how can I educate them to help them
yeah,
understand what they're looking for, to like just giving them what they need, right? So I've been in those situations, and it's more of like they need that confidence, right?
yeah,
And sometimes they might not know what question to ask because
yeah.
um
Because
because
when they think
maybe.
about testing, they're still thinking about test cases.
Yes, they're coming from their own understanding of what they think what testing is, which is why they frame their questions in such way. But in actual sense, that what they're asking is that numbers that doesn't give them. Say, like for example, if I say like, okay, we have 100 test cases or some 200 test cases, they might ask next question.
Yeah,
So that's the starting. So I think it's more about helping them understand how do we even test, like what is it that we are looking at, and helping them understand the approach. And it's more about giving them that visibility, transparency,
yeah,
and confidence. That's when the change of the language starts shifting. And as you mentioned as well, like talking about risks, it's more about like, okay, these are the features that we have to release, these are the risks, but we will cover, for
yeah.
example, feature by X. So it's more about explaining more detail. So like for example, if they ask a number of test cases and you give them the number of test cases, does it help? No, it doesn't. So
No.
you have to give them, you have to tell this again and again, right? Telling the whole story
And
whenever
I
you're talking
like
about
the
quality.
thing transparent, because we might not be confident all the time, and
Yes.
we might not want that release to go out at certain time. Maybe the business is pushing due to certain reasons. So having that transparency will help them forming that decision.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And it could be in any form. It doesn't mean that you just have to give them the number, metric,
Yeah.
having a conversation. And then that's when coming up with a metric that helps them understand instead of straight away whatever they're asking, giving them the number and helping them understand what, because for some of the stakeholders, at least in my experience, some of the stakeholders, it's more about they ask this, what is the automation coverage, to understand
Yeah.
like, okay, have we automated everything?
Yeah.
Right? So that they can release faster, because they think manual testing, like we shouldn't repeat this. So all these questions are coming from their understanding of how testing happens. So it's more about educating and helping them understand more, like helping them understand how this thing testing happens, and then helping them understand what information they looking that gives
Yeah.
them confidence.
And if something goes wrong, we can roll back within 10 minutes and the system will be up and running.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there any kind of metric that you have tracked That completely maybe backfired, or maybe completely that gave a wrong behavior within the team, because sometimes it does, right? Like when you capture certain metrics. So what did you learn from choosing what kind of metric that helped?
There are many, but I'm going to pick the most common example which people can resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
At one of my workplace, we were tracking automation efficiency, how many features we automated. Sound reasonable, right? But it completely backfired because one of the stakeholders thought, oh, those number looks great. So if we have automated X features, we need less number of QAs on the team. And that's a danger because they completely missed the point of automation. Automation is not about that we have automated and we don't need a QE on the team. Automation gives you a fast feedback. And the automation test can also vary, right? Because an automated test will check exactly what's programmed to check, nothing else. It doesn't have that human experience or the experience we bring. But when a QE is testing the same feature, they are noticing layout issues, maybe performance problem, which was not there before, or edge cases you never thought of, and how it behaves with real user patterns and all. This automation can never highlight. For example, login scenario, if I would automate, yes, it will go username, password, login, go to the home screen. But when I'm looking, the logo doesn't look right. Why the instead of username now
Feasibility,
it says
yeah.
email? So we are
Mhm.
going to quickly check. So automation can never replace that. So tracking that we have automated critical journeys completely backfired, mainly because lots of stakeholders do think if you have more automation, we need less queues. No, we still need queues.
Yeah,
Yes, we can have faster feedback within our code reviews, and our deployment frequency can be
yeah,
improved. But now, when I talk about automation metrics, I deliberately shift that conversation from how much we have automated to what's our feedback cycle. Maybe to test that particular ticket, it was taking us 2 days, and now our feedback cycle is quick. How quickly do we know when something is broken? So we are not doing regression every ticket, but automation can trigger
mm,
those things. Are we catching critical issues in minutes instead of hours? We can track that because metrics can easily drive the opposite behavior you want. If stakeholders doesn't know what these actually mean, so you have to carefully frame them. Otherwise, they can become a stick to beat with you. So
yeah.
now I know rather than giving just automation coverage, I talk about feedback cycle. Have you been in similar situation where you might have proposed a matrix or someone asked you to capture a matrix and that completely backfired?
Yeah, 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 I did, and I think your example was really nice one. I know I've seen that as well, where when you're tracking automation, it becomes more like, oh, it's one time done kind of a
Yeah.
mindset, right? It's not one time
It's a
once you
full-fledged
automate,
project. You need
it's a
constant
continuous.
maintain. Yeah.
Yeah, and as the product evolves, your automation has to evolve, and I've been in that similar situation as well. And another one I had was like I still remember this years ago in one of the team, we were asked to capture number of test scenarios or test cases, you call it as, right? And it was let's start capturing number of test cases per feature and then overall product. And I was like, okay, it's fine. Anyways, we will write the scenario, so let's just capture it's okay. But slowly, what happened, the mindset shift was like just to increase the number, team kept writing the more and more scenarios, which were
Yeah.
not needed as well. Like, because see, for me, I think documentation is needed. Test scenarios, we need to document it, but it should be very high level. It shouldn't be every little scenario, every basic scenario. You shouldn't, I mean, I'm not a big fan of documenting every little scenario. It's more about high level capturing, right?
Yeah.
But then because
More
we
like a
will capture,
journey. And in
yeah,
that journey, when I am testing, I will, you know,
yeah,
test multiple things. Yeah.
yeah. So because yeah, and then the mindset shift was like, okay, I just like I just need to document that. I just need to write that so that I can show that these are the number of test scenarios I have executed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what will come across as I have not done enough testing, because that was a very negative impact from for me, at least, when I was in that team where we were capturing. And then that's where I wanted to shift that, like, and then we shifted having this
It's a
discussion into
mindset as
exploratory.
well.
Yeah.
I was working with the different teams and I was asking them what your critical user journeys look like. One team said they have 1,000 test cases in their critical user journey. And I was like, 1,000 in critical. And they were like, yeah, because everything is critical for
Doesn't
us.
match. Yeah.
And so the numbers can be scary. So
Yes.
even if you have one test case, if that test case can capture that risk, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that mindset becomes like, yo, you need to show more numbers. If that decreases, that shows that you are not testing enough. So
Yeah.
that is where the mindset shift, we had to move that from, like, okay, let's not capture, let's not focus only capturing the issues, because capturing the test scenarios, but
Yeah.
let's focus on executing exploratory testing and then saying this is how we have executed the test, more than saying that these are the number of test scenarios this feature we have tested. So it's not
Yeah.
about number of test scenarios doesn't give you this is what testing has
And
been done.
even number of defects as well. Yes, during regression, did you find only 5 defects? But yes, we did prevented 50 defects before it was ready for release. So people miss that um
Yeah.
side of the thing.
Yeah, and I think that is where, right? Understanding, not just capturing what's been asked or what you have to capture, but observing it and understanding what kind of impact it's causing. Like, is it positive or negative as well, is
Yeah.
really important when we're looking into metrics. And it's not even about, as I said, right? It's not about coming up with many, even if it's one, capturing them consistently. And I
Yeah.
know the biggest like issue with metrics is like, at least for me, was like, how do we even capture it? Like, even what tool do you use, or how do
Yeah.
you, where do you get that data from? So apart from those challenges, I think as long as we use one single metric, have the understanding, and do it consistently and tell the story behind that,
And
that's where
don't
I think.
just capture a matrix because there's another team B in your organization. They are capturing that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe your head of engineering said, this team is capturing this and they have improved. But focus on what matters to you, what you want to improve, and
Yeah.
start working towards it, how you will capture that.
Yep. Yeah. Amazing. It was a lovely conversation around metrics, and thanks everyone for tuning in and listening in. And if you enjoyed this discussion, please do share and subscribe to keep up with all the future episodes with us. And also, given that we have spoken a lot about metrics, we'd definitely love to hear what metrics have actually worked for you and what metric actually backfired. Share your experiences. Drop us a message or drop a comment when we share this. So please do share.
And remember those team quality metrics like incident response time, customer facing issues, or code review pattern, how often you're rolling back deployment. You, as a QE, or maybe someone else on your team, you might not own them directly, but you can absolutely influence them. So think beyond your testing dashboard. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep it unfiltered. Cheers. Bye for now.